All right. Good afternoon, everyone. If you were in the session that I was just in with Tracy right there at the end, it started to do some weird echo. We're good to go now. We're good to go. So, thank you all for joining us. This is going to be excellent. This is the start of the bronze sponsor vendor sessions. And I have with me today here Olivia Mead, and she's the founder and CEO of Yoga for First Responders. Thank you so much for being a sponsor and for being here. I can't wait for this session, and we'll go ahead and take it on. For those who are here, there are already some polls that are there. You can check those out. There'll be some other ones that come up later on, but have an excellent one and take it away.
I already see a great question from Sheila. Is there an age limit on yoga? I'll just answer that right now. Then I'll do the rest of the questions at the end. No, there's no age limit. I'm looking at some of these polls right now. And Savannah, you are 100% right. I forgot to put an option on there of not enough time, which I think is number one for all of us, including me. So, all right, really good to see all these answers. And I've added the sort of who's tried yoga before, because some people are like, did I just do yoga? Was that a yoga class? I'm not really sure. So as Ricardo said, I'm Olivia Mead. I'm the founder and CEO of Yoga for First Responders. We are a nonprofit organization. And this is yoga for the first responders, sort of an introduction to yoga and the protocol that we use with Yoga for First Responders. So the mission of our nonprofit is to provide first responders and military personnel with traditional yoga training that is culturally informed and job specific for the purposes of effectively processing stress, building resilience, and enhancing performance. I started at Los Angeles Fire Department and Los Angeles Police Department in 2013. But since then, we have reached, in last year alone, in 2019, our nonprofit, we have over 300 instructors. We've reached over 12,000 first responder and military participants just last year in 109 cities, in 27 states, 5 countries, 145 departments. We've been featured on CBS This Morning, Oprah Magazine, Reebok, National Geographic, and we also have some amazing partners that we work with to help us support our mission, including Ricardo and Within the Trenches. And so we're just so happy to be here because this is a really valuable tool and a lot of people are getting a lot out of it. And my job today is to introduce you to this tool so you can start using it immediately. So I wanted to go over what we're going to accomplish in this next hour. It's going to seem like a lot, but we're going to get it done, my friends. So we're going to explain the original intent of yoga and address misconceptions. There are a lot of misconceptions about yoga, which keeps people from trying it. If I look back at one of the polls, I added intimidation on there too, because I think there's some incorrect beliefs about what yoga is, which stops people from doing it. We're going to define these buzzwords now of mindfulness and resilience with training applications for both. We're going to assess how a career in emergency telecommunication can affect the mind, body, and nervous system. I'll provide a skill set often missed in public safety training. Learn and practice foundational techniques of yoga and YFFR protocol. Yes, we're going to do that today. And then finally, I want to introduce to you an option to continue your training after this hour session, which is our app Cyber Academy. So I'll give that to you guys at the end. So first things first, let's talk about what yoga is. So I want to look back at this poll and see how many of you, okay, we have 16 of you who have done yoga, 11 who have not. Great, I'm so glad to be your first yoga teacher. But everyone, I'm imagining, has heard of yoga. No one has never heard of yoga before. And so I want you to think about, you can even enter it into the chat, why you think people do yoga. What is it for? Because the main thing that I hear all the time when I ask that question is that it's for stretching or it's for relaxation. And that's like not totally wrong, but kind of misses the mark at the same time. So I Google image the word yoga, and this is what I found, this image here. Now, it's no wonder people think that yoga is to stretch or be more flexible or relaxation, because what do all these images have in common? They're all ladies. They are all white ladies, and they're all doing these weird positions, and some are doing it on a beach in front of a sunset, which is supposed to indicate relaxation. So I want to unpack these two terms a little bit. Okay. So stretching, when I hear that word stretching, to me, it's this connotation of a sit and reach. Have you ever seen the person at the gym, or maybe you were the person at the gym, that's sitting and trying to reach for their toes like this? And they do it every single day, and you see them at the gym doing it every day. And 6 months later, they've made no progress. They're still like this, about a foot away from their toes. So how come they're doing a sit and reach, but they're still not gaining mobility or that flexibility that they're looking for? That's because when we focus on trying to pull or push the muscle, we are missing where immobility and mobility comes from. The source of immobility is actually the fascia and the connective tissue that are in and around the muscles and the joints. And fascia and connective tissue is originally made to be soft and supple. But then when stress and trauma and challenges happen in life, the fascia and connective tissue start to harden up to create this body armor for us to protect us from future stress. And when I'm talking about stress that the body holds on to like that, I'm talking about mental stress, emotional stress, and physical stress. And by physical stress, it's not just doing something difficult with the body. Sitting like this at a desk for a long period of time creates a lot of physical stress. And so if we want to open up our mobility, we have to process and remove and eradicate the stress that the tissues are holding on to, okay? And yoga, by the way, is a 5,000-year-old philosophy and science. And there are many ancient texts and masters of yoga. And not one of these texts at all ever mentions anything about stretching or flexibility as a goal or on how to do it, okay? So by me teaching yoga, I'm not teaching you a way to sit and reach and touch your toes. What I am teaching that then creates mobility is how to process the stress out of the physical tissues, and mobility is a valuable result of that. Okay, so there's that. Now let's move on to relaxation. Okay, so when someone relaxes at the end of a hard week, do they go to a yoga mat typically? Like, ooh, it's been a really hard week, I'm gonna go relax on the yoga mat. No, what do they do? What do people do? It's okay, you can say it. It's way easier to relax, that you can get an almost instantaneous relaxation like response from. I'll just say it if you don't want to type it in the chat. Is alcohol, booze, a glass of wine, right? We relax by drinking, by eating, by going on vacation, by getting massages. And the problem with that is all of that is only temporary coping mechanisms, because all of them are temporary. The booze wears off. You have to come home from the vacation. All of those things, you have to rely on an outside source. It doesn't come from you. You have to rely on the massage therapist, on the alcohol. You have to rely on Mexico, on a vacation, on Netflix, on food. You have to rely on something else. And none of those things you can do and still remain functional for your job simultaneously. And in some cases, if there isn't moderation, they can have some adverse effects, like with alcohol, okay? So I don't want to teach you another temporary coping mechanism. That's not what yoga's for. It's not another way to relax and then you're still bound up when you get back to work. So what I'm teaching, yoga goes biologically deeper than just stretching and relaxation. What we're teaching with yoga is regulation. So here's the difference. Relaxation temporarily calms the nervous system. So you feel free from tension and anxiety, repose, tranquility, peacefulness, stress, free, zen out, but your systems are off. You are just coping with stress. What yoga is teaching is neuroplastic healing, effectively activating the nervous system, working with high stress. Systems are on, but they're in control, and then you're processing the stress afterwards. So regulation isn't just down, it's actually how to like in a very healthy way, be in your activated state and then be able to come back to your regulated state. So yoga is self-directed, by your own hand, permanent biological transformation versus a temporary relaxation coping mechanism. So if yoga isn't about stretching and we're not doing it to relax, then what is yoga even for? So the original intention of yoga is to have mastery over the mind and optimal functioning of the entire psychophysiological system. That's why yoga was created thousands of years ago. Has anyone here ever felt that the mind is mastering them? And mindfulness, I see Brandy said, we're going to get to mindfulness in a minute. So has anyone felt like they can't go to sleep at night because of their thoughts, or a concern or worry, or projecting something for the future, or being caught in a past memory is taking over their present moment? That's the mind controlling you. The mind is your tool. And Erica says, yes. I mean, if you're an adult, you have experienced this before, right? And so the mind is a tool. And just like a puppy, when you first get a puppy, you have to train it so it's not annoying, so it's a nice companion. Just like a puppy, we have to train the mind to be our tool. It's so powerful that it needs training in order to be the tool that it is meant to be. So original yoga training is the training to master the mind. I mean, yoga is just a mental and neurological training system. So what does that mean to have mastery over the mind and optimal functioning of your entire system? It means that you have the ability to process stress and build mental and physical resilience toward incoming stress. And what does this mean? It means that you have proactive preparedness for long-term survivability. That's the result of practicing yoga with that intention. So now when you try yoga, which we're going to do at the end of this session, and when you try it in the future, when you are practicing yoga with that intention, not to stretch or to relax, but when you're like, no, I'm here to master my mind, I'm here to process stress, and I'm here to build resilience, what's the result of that? The result of a yoga practice with that intention is that you will have the ability to self-regulate your own system. You won't need to rely on something else. Enhance self-awareness and situational awareness. Controlled mindful responses versus emotional reactions. Enhanced proprioception and fine motor skills under stress. Decreased impulse variability. Intelligent and accurate gut responses. Oxygen is used more effectively to the brain. Ability to process stress, leading to strength versus depletion. Increased physical strength and mobility, so yes, that is there. Less injury, faster recovery time, emotional adaptability in rapidly changing circumstances, ability to perform well and under pressure, access to the flow state, which is our optimal level of consciousness when we're performing well. A full functioning prefrontal cortex, that's where we create verbal expression and problem solving. And that's enhanced with yoga. Arousal control and cognitive functioning, ability to recover and access effective sleep. So all those things are known benefits from practicing yoga with an intention of mental and neurological training versus a sit and reach stretch. Now, let me ask you this. Everything that I just mentioned as the benefits of yoga, do those things sound like they would be valuable to someone in your career? And I'll wait for the answers there, but I have a feeling the answer is going to be yes, because when I ask this question in other presentations, it's an overwhelming yes. But then let me ask you this, if that's true, then how come first responders are still isolated from the practice of yoga and the ability to do it consistently? Well, I've identified 3 areas that has made this to be true. The first we've already identified, which is the marketing of and branding of yoga in the West, which is for money. I mean, yoga is a $1 billion industry, and they're going to market to those who are going to keep bringing money into the industry. So that's one. The second is when yoga has been attempted to be brought into public safety facilities. There's been a lack, in my experience, there's been a lack of cultural competency. And this goes with what Tracy's saying, we don't know what it means. There's that lack of being able to bring this practice to the culture of the population. And I've seen a lot of yoga teachers trying to change the people in that culture and say, you change who you are and your beliefs to do yoga the way I want you to do it, rather than taking the principles and tailoring them to be presented and taught in a way that's culturally informed. The third area that I've identified is that what we're talking about with the brain and nervous system, that's called the subtle body. This is the gross physical body, and it's way easier to see changes in the physical body. Like if someone's getting stronger or running faster, you can see those improvements very easily measurable. But it's more difficult to measure the subtle body improvements. And therefore, it's harder to teach, harder to learn, harder to adopt, and harder to accept. And so therefore, it's typically been dismissed until now because of biofeedback machines. So biofeedback machines are tracking brain waves, brain mapping, and neural feedback. And what they're showing is that with mindfulness and resilience training, that neuroplasticity is possible. Neuroplasticity is possible. Psychophysiological coherence is possible. You can improve gray matter, increase cognitive functioning, and your own ability to self-regulate simply by doing mindfulness and resilience practices. And this is being proven now on these brain scans and then with the biofeedback machine. So let me tell you about what neuroplasticity means. So neuroplasticity is the ability to change the structure and function of your own brain by your own hand and train your entire nervous system to return to regulation and normal functioning after dysregulation. You can change your brain, the structure and function of your brain. That's what neuroplasticity means. And that is shown to be true when one practices mindfulness and resilience, such as yoga. I mean, this blows my mind, even though this is like the 100th time I've said this, it always blows my mind that you can change how your brain functions. The other thing I mentioned was coherence. So what is coherence? I'm going to read, this is from Heart Math, and their whole thing is studying coherence. And this is their definition of what it means. Personal coherence, also known as psychophysiological coherence, refers to the synchronization of our physical, mental, and emotional states. It can be measured by our heart rhythm patterns. The more balanced and smooth they are, the more in sync or coherent we are. When we're in a coherent state, virtually no energy is wasted because our systems are performing optimally, and there is synchronization between heart rhythms, the respiratory system, blood pressure rhythms. Among the many benefits of personal coherence are increased composure, more energy, clear thinking, enhanced immune system function, and hormone balance. So that's another benefit that they're seeing from practicing the tools of yoga, of mindfulness, of resilience. So this graph that I'm showing you here, this is a police officer. This is a graph that I did with my coherence measuring software. And I hooked him up on like day 2 of yoga training to this machine that measures coherence with the heart rhythm patterns. So the first part of this graph is me stressing him out. I was asking him questions. I was making him do math in front of a group of people. I was making him sing in front of his peers. Now, where that line is, that little blue dotted line, is when we started to do the exercises that we teach in yoga for first responders, or maybe probably a little bit before that, because the line indicates when he gets into a coherent state. So through the techniques of YFFR, which I'm going to teach you today, he was able to put himself in a coherent state, which you can see by his even heart rhythm patterns. So let me ask you this. Which officer would you rather be working with? The one before that blue line or the one after? So if we all had the tools to put ourselves in a coherent state under stress and we knew what to do, then we could bring ourselves, like you see what's happening neurologically, we could do that ourselves. This whole graph was about 7 minutes from the beginning to end. That's how quick someone can get them in a coherent state if they're in dysregulation. I want to read you a specific study about that, but before I do, I've been dropping a lot of words that are buzzwords nowadays, and you probably heard them before, and I feel like they never get properly defined. So people don't really know what they are. So these are the words. So if quickly you want to just jot in what you think these words mean. What does mindfulness mean? What does resilience mean? What does awareness mean? I'm sure everyone has a really good idea of what it is, and you'll probably see that the answers are generally going to kind of be the same, a really good idea of it. But I don't think anyone has a real tactical approach. They are supposed to be so important, but does anyone really know like the tactical 1, 2, 3 on how to get these concepts done? So I want to give that to you now. Let's start with mindfulness. Okay. Anything can be practiced mindfully. Yoga can be practiced mindfully. Doing your dishes can be practiced mindfully. Mowing your lawn. Even attending this conference and listening to presentations can be done mindfully. All of those things can also be done without mindfulness, including yoga. I'm seeing some of these answers coming in. Yeah, see, you're all in the right pool, exactly, the right pool of mindfulness. Those of us who practice yoga a lot are the most susceptible to not practicing yoga mindfully. So there are 3 ingredients if you want to be practicing mindfulness in anything that you do, okay? The first is intention. You have to know what you're intending to do. I'm intending to present this to you mindfully. You're intending to watch it mindfully. You're intending to, do your dishes. So you have an intention. The second is to have an action toward that intention. By action, it could just mean sitting, or what are you doing to get to that intention? Now, here's the thing about that action. The mind, body, and nervous system all have to work together toward that intention. The physical body doesn't have a problem doing that, right? You've sat yourself in the chair, you're watching the computer, great. The physical body, check, we got that. But the mind and nervous system are a different story, because you might be here listening and watching, but your mind might be trailing somewhere else. Is anyone on their phone right now at the same time, right? So if your mind is somewhere else, even if you're not on your phone and you're watching, our thoughts can still trail into, ooh, what's for lunch? What sessions after this? Remember to write that note about the last session. And wherever your mind is, that's where the nervous system follows like a puppy. So you physically might be here, but your mind and nervous system could be somewhere else. And that's actually a very basic explanation of post-traumatic stress, is that your physical body's in one environment and your mind and nervous system are caught somewhere else. So mindfulness is a very effective tool to heal from post-traumatic stress, because mindfulness is the opposite of post-traumatic stress. So intention, action, and the last thing is awareness. So I saw some kind of buzzwords in there that were pointing towards awareness. What does it mean to be aware? John Kabat-Zinn says that awareness means you're paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. So we have to be careful that we're not like, oh yeah, I'm being aware. I'm being aware that you don't know how to do your job, or I'm being aware that you're lazy. It's not that. It's without judgment means I don't need to change anything. And if I choose to change something about this environment, I can then take those steps to do it. But in that moment of awareness, it doesn't come with that need to make any changes. So if intention, action, and awareness are there, you are being mindful. Here's a quick hack if you want to make sure that, especially that number 2, the action with the mind, body, and nervous system are there. If you are intentional about how you're breathing and how you are placing your body, and intentional about your thoughts, all of a sudden, all of those 3 things come together. So if you're like, ooh, I really trailed off there, notice, how am I sitting right now? Let me make sure I'm sitting purposely. Let me do a controlled breath. And all of a sudden, you are back into mindfulness. So that's a quick hack to bring your mind and your nervous system back into your body. Okay. The second one I want to cover, or third, I should say, is resilience. So how many of you believe that you are a resilient person? Because I bet a lot of you are. But how do you know? I would love to see in the chat, how do you know that you're resilient? The reason I know I'm resilient is because, like anything else that I know I can do, I train to be. You have to train to be resilient. It doesn't just happen. And I see a lot of the definition of resilience means bouncing back. Well, a lot of people, you see them come back to work. They're sitting there. Does that mean that they're resilient? We have to have a training, like anything else you train for to become good at. You also have to have a training in place consistently in order to be resilient. So here are 3 principles of resilience training for it to be successful. The first is it has to be proactive. We can't wait until we're in the thick of it and then try to then remember the presentation on resiliency. You have to start training when you feel good. You have to, if you're feeling resilient, you don't skip that day. You keep your training going. So we have to train proactively for what we know or could lie ahead for us. The second is we have to think of it more than just bouncing back. Who wants to just go back to where they were yesterday? We have to think of that adversity and challenges and trauma and stress are things that if we knew how to use them to process that stress, we could actually be stronger and better because of them. So resilience is getting stronger and growing from adversity. And then finally, effective and consistent recovery has to be in place. You are only as resilient as your ability to recover. So if you're not practicing consistent recovery methods, it's going back to that regulation thing, guys. If we don't have the ability to come back to recovery, we're going to get stuck up here, which we'll talk about in a second too. So we have to have that ability to be with high stress and regulate and recover afterwards. So if you're not finding that consistent recovery, you're not a resilient person. So those are the 3 principles when we're practicing resiliency training to make those benefits happen that we spoke about earlier. Okay, so now that we talked about mindfulness and resilience, what they really are, and how to practice them, the principles, I want to read the study for you. One more thing about mindfulness and resilience, the buzzwords, right? We hear them all the time, these words, especially now that wellness is getting more of a hot topic, which is great. I want to give you another phrase for them in case those words are going in one ear and out the other. The first for mindfulness is alert presence. So when you hear the word mindfulness, think to yourself, alert presence. For resilience, a word you can use instead is robustness or grit. And see if that kind of helps you embody it a little bit more. Okay, here's the study that showed the resiliency training working for first responders and how. This again is a study done by HeartMath. Okay. Physiological measurements. So this is a group of police officers in California. Okay. One group had resiliency training, one group did not. Physiological measurements were obtained to determine the real-time cardiovascular impact of acutely stressful situations encountered in highly realistic simulated police calls used in police training. The resilience building training improved officers' capacity to recognize and self-regulate their responses to stressors in both work and personal contexts. Officers experienced reduction in stress, negative emotions, depression, and increased peacefulness and vitality as compared to a control group. Improvements in family relationships, more effective communication and cooperations within work teams, and enhanced work performance were also noted. Heart rate and blood pressure measurements taken during simulated police call scenarios show that acutely stressful circumstances typically encountered on the job, remember that, result in a tremendous degree of physiological activation from which it takes a considerable amount of time to recover. Training in resilience building and self-regulation skills could significantly benefit police organizations by improving judgment and decision-making and decreasing the frequency of on-the-job driving accidents and the use of excessive force in high-stress situations. Fewer citizens' complaints and decreased organizational liabilities were also noted. Sound good? So that's just from resilience training, which is extremely similar to what we teach in yoga for first responders. The reason I wanted to pause at typically encountered on the job when they were talking about scenarios is that a lot of times when we're talking about stress management and wellness and resilience and all this good stuff, it's always for the big, difficult, critical incidents. And although, yes, we want to build resilience for those too, what we can't forget is that cumulative stress, meaning all the little tiny consistent stressors, have the same effect on the brain, body, and nervous system as acute trauma. So if we haven't been in a really bad situation yet, we think that we're safe from all of those symptoms of secondary traumatic stress or vicarious traumatization, but we're not. A police officer described it to me as taps on my shoulder. He started tapping me like this, and he said, "Does this hurt?" And I said, "No." He said, "If I did this for 20 years, you'd have a huge welt that you'd probably never recover from." So I want to ask you guys what your little taps are. What's part of the job, maybe even part of the job description, we never want to think anything's routine or we don't want to become complacent, but what's just, typical scenarios that are part of the job that are chipping away at your nervous system and chipping away at your prefrontal cortex, because cumulative stress and trauma start to dull the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for verbal expression and problem solving. So the job itself is chipping away at the part of the brain that's needed for the job, right? So I would love to hear some examples from you guys, and I'd love to see it in the chat, especially because I do work with dispatchers, but not as much as I do with firefighters and police officers and paramedics. So I get to hear a lot of some of their typical Tuesday stressors. Some of the things they said were the unknown of traffic stops, leadership pressure, frequent flyer 911 calls. Maybe you guys can relate to that. Community relations, dealing with people. When deputies don't answer the radio, it always makes me think that they're in trouble. Yeah, Christine, that's a great one. I really want to remember that. The way you guys communicate, if there isn't that immediate response, then of course your mind, that's again going back to the mind owning you, right? The mind starts to spiral, loud beeping, chewing, mouth open. Yeah, I mean, seriously, all these things start to chip away at your nervous system and creating that cumulative stress. Waiting for volunteer EMS to go. Okay, yeah, these are great ones. And so this is what I don't want you to forget about when there's conversations about the big, difficult stuff. Every day, you need this training just for the job. Not for the critical part of the job, just for the job. You need proactive resilience training, a tool for that, okay? What happens in the nervous system? I wanna go over this really quickly so that we're not, good one, Joyce, too. So we're not spending too much time in science here, but what happens to the body when a stressor happens, whether it's real or perceived? Like Christine said, it makes me think they're in trouble. You're perceiving they're in trouble. So even if you're perceiving they're in trouble, Christine, they're not, your nervous system's still gonna have the same reaction as if they were in trouble. And this is what happens. Okay, so the nervous system, we have our central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, Peripheral is outside everything that's not the brain or spinal cord, ganglia, nerves. The peripheral nervous system is divided in two. We have the somatic nervous system, which is things that we can control. I can move my hands and arms. Autonomic is what we can't control. It happens without us thinking about it. Those things are respiration, thank God. Perspiration, not so fun to not be able to control. Digestion, heartbeat, cardiovascular, but also the stress response is part of the autonomic nervous system. And the stress response has the sympathetic stress response, which is fight, flight, or freeze when we're under that threat, and parasympathetic, rest and digest. We are meant to be in parasympathetic 99% of the time. Sympathetic nervous system is really designed for when our life really is in danger. But as you guys have pointed out, with all these little tiny taps on your shoulder, you're going in to the sympathetic stress response that it's not necessarily designed for. And it's really important that the stress response is under the autonomic nervous system, because for survival, we have to react before we think about it. Think about, like, if we're standing on grass in a yard and we jump back because our amygdala sees something, okay, our fear-based part of our brain, and it's just a rolled up garden hose. Well, we'd rather look silly and jumping back from a garden hose than we take the time, the couple extra seconds, for our prefrontal cortex to look at it, analyze it, see it's a garden hose and not a snake, and then be like, oh, we don't need to jump back. Because if it was a snake, then we're in trouble. Okay, so that's why the stress response has to be before our conscious thinking brain. Now, when you do go into a stress response, whether it is perceived or actual, there's a flood of hormones, which I'm sure we've all heard of, that makes us superhuman so that we can fight or flee or whatever we need to do for survival. And those stress hormones are adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine. And what those hormones do is take blood away from our visceral organs and brings them to our limbs and our muscles so we're stronger, so we can fight or flee. Our digestion pauses and our immunity lowers so we can use that energy to fight or flee and become stronger. Blood pressure increases, heart rate increases, the blood vessels constrict, the brain waves move into a high beta state, and we're in a hypervigilant state, and that is turned on. Again, that is meant for a very short amount of time just to save our lives or save someone else's life. You can live this amount of, you can continue to live in a healthy way if this amount of time you're spent without digestion working properly, without immunity protecting you, without your visceral organs getting the blood and fluid that they need. So once the threat is gone, we have to come back down to parasympathetic regulation, where we're meant to live most of the time. And there are three ways that we can actually get our nervous system to come back to the baseline. The first way is after a stressor where you go up to the ceiling. So if this is baseline, this is the ceiling, the stressor makes you go up to the top, okay? Once the stressor is gone, you move through sort of that hypervigilant cycle of, you might crash first, you might stay up here for a while, but to come back down to baseline takes about 24, I've even heard up to 48 hours, depending on the stressor, but only if you're in a sterile, neutral environment. So let me ask you this. After you guys get a stressor, are you able to find a sterile, neutral environment for 24 hours without any other stressors for your nervous system to float back down to baseline? I'm going to say no. None of us do. Because after the stressor, you might start to float down and your system starts to calm down, but then what happens? Another stressor comes in, maybe at work, maybe it's at home, but we're never given the opportunity to just let our nervous system float back down to baseline after activation. But there's another way. We're mammals, and all mammals have an inherent way of their nervous system rebalancing itself or putting the pieces back together after activation. So if you watch Nat Geo and you watch the antelope get chased by the lion, and once the lion's gone and the antelope is safe, he outran him, There he goes behind a bush and he starts tremoring. And he starts making some weird breath stuff, big yawns, maybe the horse breath. And what that does is balances out the nervous system and processes the stress out of the tissues. Because mammals out in the wild are not encountering post-traumatic stress symptoms, even though their life is in danger literally multiple times a day. They're sleeping fine, they're reproducing fine, they're not tight or immobile. They're going to the bathroom, they're doing all normal stuff because they have that built-in ability to tremor and do breathing exercises to process all the stress hormones out and come back to baseline before continuing on. What we have that the outside antelope doesn't have is a crazy thinking brain, a mind that feels fear, shame, guilt, that talks to itself and says, man up, you signed up for this. This is your job. Don't cry. Don't look weak. And the mind is so strong that it can override the nervous system's natural way of rebalancing. So after a stressor, instead of going through the methods of processing the stress hormones out, we sit back down at our desk and all the stress hormones stay into our joints, into our fascia, into our connective tissue. And then we say, oh, I'm so inflexible. I can't move my body. My back hurts. It's not because we're getting older. It's because life's given us more stress and we've taken it on like a storage unit instead of processing it out. Okay. All right. So cross that off the list. We don't have that available to us. But the third option is if we had a skill set to process the stress out manually, like we brush our teeth and process out the junk from eating and drinking and some people smoking all day. Do we have that 2-minute skill, like we're taught when we're younger, of brushing our teeth to rebalance our nervous system? Well, unfortunately, the answer is no. We have never been taught, and everyone should be taught, let alone people in public safety, but all of us should be taught when we're little how, just like we're taught to brush our teeth, how to have a technique or a skill in place to process out the inevitable stress that life brings us. But at this point, that has not been taught. It's been suggested once we're an adult, so try meditating, try spending time with family. But those suggestions aren't reality, in many cases. So we're left with no way of processing stress out of the nervous system. And so since we can never get back here to baseline, we get stuck up here in the activated state that was built for 1% of our life. And that's our new normal. And that is where we live. And when we live there, what suffers? Our assessment and attention to detail suffers. Our ability to communicate effectively suffers. Decision versus survival part of the brain, meaning we're living in the survival part of the brain versus the decision-making part of the brain. Our ability to recover suffers, which, as we noted, that is in direct correlation with how resilient you are. So you have lost your resilience. Brain-to-body communication suffers, emotional intelligence in different circumstances. The body stays in the threat response and your nervous system stays in the threat response, which again is post-traumatic stress. And it's because of these things that we're seeing, these adverse effects in nervous system dysregulation is making us see statistics. 32% of dispatchers experience distress after potentially traumatic calls. 3.5% of dispatchers experience symptoms classified as post-traumatic stress. And there's been a recent study in 2012, actually, and I can read it here, this quote from it. It says, duty-related trauma exposure in 911 telecommunicators, considering the risk for post-traumatic stress, bringing to light that PTSD symptomology in telecommunicators. This study has been instrumental in showing that dispatchers are at risk for PTSD in a similar way as police officers. So we focus so much on PTSD for police officers or firefighters, but this study has shown that dispatchers are at the exact same level of susceptibility to post-traumatic stress. And it's because we're staying here, and we're seeing those what comes from living in this high activated state always. And again, remember, these statistics aren't there because someone didn't relax enough. They didn't drink enough beers. They didn't go on vacation enough, or it's not because of that. Again, it's because there's lacking of regulation skill, not relaxation. So there is a missing skill set in public safety training. And this is when I want to add another poll, if we could. I first want to ask you guys, if you could respond to this poll, how much of the job is mental? How much of it requires that mental fortitude and the mental side of it versus the tactical side? So I'd love to see the responses in that poll. And then the follow-up question in the next poll is, how much training did you receive percentage-wise in your academy training for the mental and emotional side of the job? So I'd love to see those answers come in, and I'll take a look in a minute. There are basic skills that anyone learns in the academy for the job they're going to do, like geography, unit identifiers, simulcasting over radio channels, prioritizing calls, etc. And those are basic skills you learn. But if resilience is supposed to be as important as everyone's saying it is, then how come proactive resilience training isn't being taught as a basic tactical skill like everything else? It's again, there's some suggestions for it, but that's really going to determine the long-term survivability of the job, so you're able to do the short-term urgent tactical skills. So if we were to create a skill set to fill in this gap, this educational gap in the academy, what would it look like? Well, we know from the data and the biofeedback machine that the skill has to be a vehicle for practicing mindfulness to get these benefits. It has to have a method for processing stress, and it has to have techniques for consistent recovery. And it also has to address the mind, cognitive, somatic body, and neurological body, the nervous system, because all three, cognitive, somatic, neurological, mind, body, nervous system, all three are affected by trauma and stress. So all three have to be addressed with resilience training, not just the mind, not just the nervous system, not just the body, but all three together. So can you guys think of a training tool already in existence that addresses the mind, body, and nervous system, is a vehicle for mindfulness, a method for processing stress, and has a built-in recovery method at the end? I mean, maybe something that's been around for like 5,000 years. Yoga. The answer is yoga, right? So yoga fills in the missing skill set that is so desperately needed in public safety training. So great, yoga, we're on board. Yes, Linda, yoga. Yes, everyone loves it. We get it. Let's do it. Now we have another problem. Yoga is still, in our modern Western world, has not been a logistical or cultural match for public safety. So this is what we need for it to be effective, but for it to be successful, those above techniques and methods must be tailored to the unique needs of the first responder population. And even within the first responder population, the different cultures within it, such as what do dispatchers need specifically. That's why we created yoga for first responders. We're taking traditional yoga and tailoring it to the needs of public safety. So we tailor yoga to the needs of the first responder population and culture. Yoga for first responders protocol is job specific and culturally informed, a skill to process stress, build resilience, and enhance performance. The approach is proactive, so not just a reactive tool when something happens. Consistent, practical, effective, and safe. So under that third bullet point, enhance performance, that's right. Yoga is not just about down regulation. Remember, regulation is about how to be with stress and how to process it out. So we also have to work on how we can perform better. So the three areas that YFFR specifically works on how to enhance your performance is it's been shown that yoga is a tool to access the flow state in the brain. So the flow state is our optimal state of consciousness for high levels of performance. So really high performing athletes find themselves in the flow state. If you've even been in a really deep, amazing conversation and 3 hours have flown by, that's getting into flow. The flow state can be dulled by cumulative stress, and it's almost like you can't get that second wind. That's because of burnout. But yoga has been shown to train the brain how to access flow more readily. Yoga also teaches you techniques on how to perform under pressure, how to use stress as a tool. And this is basic mindset or cognitive behavioral therapy training, mindset training, mindset growth training, mental growth training. And those techniques we use in yoga so that you can perform under stress and pressure consistently every single time. And then the third bullet point is actual tactical performance, because the part of the brain that's worked in yoga is responsible for clear communication, fine motor skills, accuracy, and breathing tactically under stress. So we teach you how to breathe tactically, how to think tactically, and how to move tactically. So yes, even tactical performance is addressed in yoga. So what does all of this mean for you guys to have all of these skills? Well, longevity of your career, improved internal communication, a sharp tool of the body and mind, and development of the whole elite responder. How can I say this? How do I know this to be true? Is because everything we teach is evidence-based training. So this is, I'll give you a couple of examples here. This is a research study that was done in Australia. And what they found is that for every dollar spent on this training that was very specific, it was a 4-hour proactive mental resilience training. For every dollar spent on that, they got $13 ROI back in sick leave and work-related sick leave and disability. So the people that did this study gave this study to us to use to show the effectiveness of proactive yoga training. So it actually saves money by keeping people on the job and out of disability and sick leave. Practicing yoga has been associated with many positive outcomes in various aspects of physical performance and well-being, including decrease in blood pressure, decrease in body mass index, improvement in pulmonary function, enhanced muscle torque, decreased low back pain, improved cardiovascular performance, improved mental health. And I do have a citation for every single one of these studies that shows this to be true. And tactical breath work, which is a staple, a principle of yoga, which I'm about to show you right now, so you can take that with you, has been endorsed by the Navy SEALs for reducing burnout, reducing blood pressure, increasing cardiorespiratory fitness, and enhance calm and focus in tense situations. So are you guys ready to do yoga? Are you ready to jump in now that you've seen all this stuff and we've have testimonials to show it and we have evidence-based training? Well, where to start? So I'm going to teach you right now before we're done a foundational breathwork technique that's probably the game changer for everybody. And I'm going to do that momentarily. But I'm also going to make sure you know how to access Cyber Academy, which is our app. So I'll teach you the foundational technique now, but then you can keep practicing that technique and more with our app. So stay tuned for that. Of course, Yoga for First Responders is on social media. You can sign up for our newsletter on our website, where we're always giving articles and just little nuggets about this training tool. But I think the most important thing, guys, is for you to share the message. I can talk about this till my face is blue, but I'm not on the job. And so it's up to you guys to change the misconceptions about yoga based on what you heard here today. Share the message that you're practicing, and that's going to invite more people to practice. And I can say this because people have told this to me, that it's saved their lives. So it could save someone's life if you just share it and support those who are doing it. Okay, so before we do our 3-part breath foundational technique, I want to just play one 1-minute video for you. This was done recently and after our recent instructor school training. So give a listen. Oh, hold on, please hold.
I'm a dispatcher for Broomfield. How I felt on the first day coming into it, I was really nervous since I've never done yoga before. I didn't know what to expect. And then when we started doing the poses, I was very conscious of making sure I could do everything right. And then at the end of the day, I felt so much better. I didn't feel any stress in my shoulders, which I normally feel a lot of stress. And I felt almost like a different person. My mental message from when I first started was just to try and get through this and see what I think of it. And then at the end, now my mental message is this is something that needs to be brought to first responders, including dispatchers, because it does help and I feel a difference. What I would say to somebody who's hesitant, especially a dispatcher, is just give it a try and see, because you don't know how you're going to react to it. I didn't think I was going to get anything out of it. And now I'm like ready to do more yoga.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to teach you a quick breathing technique. And this breathing technique is what I have been told by everyone is the #1 takeaway for them. So this is the foundational technique, and you can always review this again on the Cyber Academy app. So if you're sitting in a chair, you can lean back in your chair, but try to sit up nice and tall. Place your hands on your low belly, like where your belt is. And we're going to breathe through the nose. So we're going to take a giant inhale, and we're going to breathe into our lowest part of our belly, almost like you're inflating a balloon, and you should feel your hands expand. And you can also feel your low back expand against the chair behind you. Try to have your feet grounded on the floor. So just belly breathing. We tend to breathe a little too high up here. So try to get it nice and low down, like you're pushing your belly against your belt. Try to keep breathing through the nose, as that's a calming breath. Let's take one hand and put it on the rib cage. One hand on the belly, one hand on the ribs. Inhale, the belly inflates, then the ribs inflate. As you exhale, the ribs deflate, and then the belly deflates. Let's try that a couple more times. Inhale, belly. Ribs wide, 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 wide. So you're stretching the muscles between the ribs. Exhale, ribs deflate. Breath deflates in the belly. Good. Now one hand on the belly, one hand on the chest. Inhale, belly. Ribs inflate. Breathe all the way into the top hand without lifting the shoulders. Now as you exhale, the chest depresses, the ribs deflate, and then the belly deflates. This is called 3-part breath. It's a controlled, measured breath. It's not meant to be natural. So let's exaggerate it a little bit more. Here we go. Inhale, belly, ribs, chest, pause, shoulders down. Feel 360 degrees around of your torso expanding. Now a controlled, slow exhale, chest, ribs, belly. Now as you do it, count to 3. Inhale for a count to 3. Belly 1, ribs 2, chest 3. Pause. Exhale for a count of 5, 4. Ribs go in 3, belly 2, 1. One more time. Here we go. Inhale, belly, ribs, chest. Pause, exhale with control, chest, ribs, belly. And for our last 2 breaths, instead of 3, 5, say to yourself, I am calm, and exhale, I am in control. It's the same amount of syllables as 3 and 5. Here we go. Inhale, I am calm, belly, ribs, chest, pause. Exhale slowly, I am in control. Exhale. Exhale, ribs, then belly. Last time, inhale, pause, exhale, slow and control, top down. Good, that's 3-part breath with recovery breath, which is in for 3, out for 5. Both of these things are on our app for you to continue to practice with. So finally, to just wrap it up, I want to let you know that yoga and how we present it is more than just on a yoga mat. We do training demos and in-service trainings just like this. So it's really easy to plug this in an in-service environment. Leadership briefings where we talk to leadership and commanders about YFFR, instructor school to become a instructor and bring it to your agency. We have curriculums to teach in the academy. Pictured there is Amber. She's a dispatcher at Denver 911 and also teaches YFFR in their academy. Of course, open classes in a chair or on a yoga mat. We also have online training and on-demand classes, which brings me to the last thing I want to share with you guys is Cyber Academy, which is our app and our online platform on our website. And that's where you can find it's almost to 100 now different audio and video files for tactical breath work, for mindfulness and meditation, for the physical aspect of yoga, for the neurological reset aspect of yoga. And there's a free version. A 3-part breath, what I just taught, is on the free version and about 15 other classes. To get the full library, I want to give you guys a discount, and the discount code is DTBG, Dare to Be Great. And that gives you a discount for $4 a month. That's it. Less than a cup of coffee to process stress, build resilience, and enhance performance. So that is information. That's the website where you can find Cyber Academy to sign up. Again, it's on the App Store and on Roku and Apple TV and all of that stuff. You can find us on the social media. I'll see what questions we have here that came in. And if please stay in touch with me. And I hope that you enjoyed this session. Oh, I can't hear you. I think you're muted. That always gets everyone every time.
It mutes in 2 different spots for some reason. I have it muted on my system here, and then I have to unmute it over there as well. So one of the questions that came in here is, can it be done safely on an exercise ball?
Yeah, I see that. So I'll tell you this. If I were seated right now, doing the breath work, absolutely. In fact, what's great about an exercise ball is it forces you to have that good alignment, which I think is critical, especially for the tactical breath work. So if you could even sit on the ball, do the breath work, and even move the ball and move your body back and forth, which we call cat and cow. And that's excellent to do on an exercise ball for sure.
Perfect. All right. Excellent. We already got people in here saying thank you and downloading the app now. So this is excellent. Very, very good.
I want to point out this last poll, how much of the job is mental. I see everyone said 90%. And then how much training did you receive? Between 10 and 30%, mostly 10%. This is exactly what I mean by that missing skill set. Do you guys see that gap? That what you need most for the job is not getting the attention it needs. The tool that we're teaching with yoga as a tool, is that skill set that's missing there. So remember, it's not stretching, it's not relaxation, it is mental and neurological resilience training.
Excellent. Thank you so much once again for coming on, for being a sponsor and doing this presentation. You know, everyone who's commenting on here is interactive. You guys are going back and forth. That was excellent. So I'm glad that everything is going well, and I will see you probably in the next advisory board meeting.
Absolutely. I will see you then. I'm getting married on Saturday, so I got to do that first. So then I'll probably see you the week after that.
Excellent. Congratulations once again.
Thank you. Yes. Thanks for having me here. It's great. What a great conference. Great people. A lot of my team has been watching and just said that there's some great conversation and great presentations happening. So we're so proud to be part of it.
Excellent. Thank you very much once again. And everyone, make sure to check out Yoga for First Responders. And we will be going to the next session. Will be keynote speaker Karima Holmes out of the Office of Unified Communications. That's DC 911. And we'll see you there. Olivia, thank you once again. I appreciate it, and have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.